Who am I? Who am I? Do we know ourselves? Let's ask it again. Who am I? It's a great question, but it is a question we don't ask ourselves enough. If we don't know ourselves, somebody else or something will define us. So we must ask the question, who am I? Welcome to my podcast, Thinking Unchained, the podcast that unchains your thinking. This is your host, Unchained Thinker, talking to you. I am glad you are here. Thank you. If you're asking yourself that question, you may be tempted to define yourself by one label. I'm a mother. I'm a father, a son, or a daughter. Maybe you define yourself with a career. I'm a nurse, a clerk, a lawyer. I'm a truck driver. I'm a teacher, a coffee barista, a scientist. Or maybe a class. I'm rich, I'm poor, and middle class. What about a status? Does a status define you? I'm an owner of a company, a student, single, married. Furthermore, can a religion define you? I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Muslim, a Hindu, a Christian, a Catholic. What about your race, your gender, your weight, your height? Do you identify yourself with a single label? Can the house you own or the apartment you rent define you? What about the car you drive? Maybe you ride the bus or take the train. Does that define you? Maybe the phone you own, the clothes you wear, your possessions. Do they define you? This I find curious. The way some people's identities are so tied to objects. Companies know this, by the way, so they market their products by connecting them to identities. For example, if you own this phone brand, you are this kind of person, and you can insert a glamorous identity here. But if you own the other phone brand, you are a different kind of person, and you can insert a non glamorous identity here. And we get caught in their traps. Then that brings a good question. Can you define yourself with a single label? Can you present a single identity about yourself? Just one. Most likely you do not. You can probably identify yourself with 10 or 20 different labels, maybe even more. What about 100? So the question remains, who am I? Now, can I put a label on you? Can I define you? Can I put you in a single group and that is your whole identity? If I attempt to put a label on you, I will be wrong and you will be very upset, and rightly so. And yet, here we are, our society putting labels on us, and we putting labels on each other. You may already be wondering, who is this guy talking to us on this podcast? What are his credentials? What is his story? Does he have any authority? Why? Why is that information necessary? So I can be labeled? Will my story or credentials give me more respect? Maybe less respect? Will a label make it easier for people to refer to me? Will a label make it easier for people to talk about my podcast, my content? What if I told you I'm a doctor? Will that put a label on me this early in my episode? Have you already created a label for me without knowing anything about me? What if I told you I'm a construction worker? Will that change how you define me? If I told you I'm a farmer, or a hairstylist, or a real estate broker, a waiter? If I'm straight, or belong to the LGBTQIA plus community? A person with limited physical abilities? Just put any label here. I'm going to take some time right now to personally ask myself that one question, how I started my episode today. Who am I? However, as I ask myself that question, I have to keep in mind that I'm looking at it from a lens. I should say lenses. Many, many lenses. I have collected these lenses from my life experiences, from my culture, from my upbringing, from my family, from my education, from my multiple job positions. So I have many lenses. All of these exposures in my life have created these lenses. Therefore, when I ask the question, who am I? I'm asking that question and looking at the answer through my lenses. I say both the question and the answer because as we ask the question, in many occasions, we already have preconceived ideas of the person and we just want confirmation. I will have another podcast to talk about lenses and how we look at life and how we view the world based on the kind of lenses we have collected during our life experiences. When we look at the world, we all see the world from different perspectives or angles with a unique view. Now, let's get back to asking myself that question. Who am I? And just a reminder, I am asking now myself that question. So am I an intellectual or am I an idiot? Am I smart or stupid? Am I a deep thinker or someone with mundane thoughts? Am I delusional or well grounded? Am I crazy or am I sane? Spiritual or secular? Am I a villager or a city dweller? Am I American or foreign? Highly educated or ghetto? The answer is yes. I am all of that and much, much more. I will explain in another episode why I'm comfortable with having all of those labels. Now, some of you will place a single label on me. Others will give me a completely different label. For the most part, I have no control over the labels I get. Gladly, no matter how many labels I get, not one single one can define me. I define myself. I know who I am, regardless of the labels I get. However, all the labels, those I am aware I have, and those I'm yet to find, all labels as a collective are needed to define myself. I understand that. I can tell you, I know who I am, or at least who I am up until this moment. Who I will be, well, I'll have to revisit this in another 5 to 10 years. I am certain, though, who I will be in the future is not who I am today. And that's a good thing. It is a great thing. My thinking unchains as I explore my horizons. Can anybody else define me? Will this podcast define me? Can a book I write, or a specialty I have, or the skills I possess define me? No. I define myself. And I want you, my listener, to do the same thing. Don't let a label define you. You define yourself. Don't let others tell you who you are. Don't let your possessions give you your identity. Now ask that question to know yourself and understand yourself, but keep in mind, you see yourself through your lenses. Once you get to know who you are, nobody else can define you, no matter how many labels they place on you. As you listen to my podcast, you will get to know me a little better. Hopefully, you can also get to know those around you a little bit better. But more importantly, I hope you get to know yourself a little better. Another question you may have: what is this podcast about? Is it about medicine, science? Is it about religion? Or is it about philosophy? Is it about culture? Is it about humanity? Or the universe? Or God? Is it about destiny, purpose, or free will? Is it just a conversational podcast? I can answer that question with a yes. I will address all of them and more. But I do hope that above all, this podcast is about discovery, an exploration of the known and the unknown. The title of today's episode, Who Am I?, will hopefully stimulate curiosity in some of you, a curiosity to go out and discover something new about yourself, today or in the future. I think it is an important question, but it is more important to answer it. Why? You may ask, why is that an important question and why is it important to answer it? Well, most people live life never pausing to ask that question, or maybe some ask it and just simply answer it with a label given to them by someone else in the past. The unexamined life is not worth living, Socrates said 2,400 years ago about the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. Those are the words of Mark Twain. But I dare to say that you cannot find out why you were born unless you find out who you are first. Let me add that I believe we may have many purposes in life, not just one. Answering the question, who am I, is extremely important so that we can unchain our thinking, unchain our view of the world, and more importantly, unchain our view of ourselves. And that brings me to the name of my podcast, Thinking Unchained. Why did I name it that way? Is it good to think with an unchained mind? Is it even possible to unchain our thinking? Is it necessary? Does it help in any way to get our thinking unchained? Does it improve our life in any way? Why do we need to unchain our thinking? Well, I don't think there is much meaning in life with our minds in chains. Would we like to live in chains? I mean, physical chains, our bodies chained to a wall. Would we like that? I wouldn't think so. So why are we comfortable with having our minds in chains our whole life? We are all born with chain thinking, chained to cultural or religious beliefs, chained to parental influences and teachings, to societal pressures, political views, our own bias. How can we unchain our thinking? Well, I believe it starts with curiosity. This brings me to the allegory of Plato's cave. I won't be able to do a deep analysis of the allegory due to time, but there are many YouTube videos, lectures, articles that do this really, really well. They explain this allegory extremely well. I invite you to get familiar with it, if you are not already, of course, familiar with Plato's cave. I apologize in advance to those who are Plato's cave experts. I know I won't do it justice in only 2 minutes, but I'll do my best. I can present a simplified version here. The allegory goes: there was a group of people who were imprisoned inside a cave since childhood. They were chained to a wall, chained in such a way they could not turn their heads or bodies to look around them. All they could see was a wall in front of them. Behind them, in a high spot, was a flame illuminating the wall they could see, the one in front of them. Shapes and figures of the real world were passed in front of the flame, and these shapes and figures casted shadows on the wall the chained group could see. They discussed among themselves what those shadows could be and gave them names and meanings. This went on for decades until one had his chains removed. He didn't move, though, at first. His chains were removed and he just stayed there. He had become so used to the cave. The cave had become so comfortable and a safe place. He wouldn't leave, so he had to be dragged out to the outside of the cave. And then he was forced to explore and experience the real world. He didn't like it at first. It was uncomfortable to be outside, but he finally enjoyed it. He finally enjoyed being out of the cave and gained great understanding, realizing he was deprived from knowledge when he was in the cave. After some time, he decided to go back to free the chained people he left in the cave. He wanted them to experience the freedom he now had and enjoy the colorful reality he was exposed to. When he reached them, he couldn't communicate with them effectively. The cave was now too dark for him. He couldn't see them that well, and he could not describe the real world in a clear manner. They didn't understand him. They called him a bunch of names. They thought he was crazy. And they became violent at him when he tried to free them. Again, there are lots of much better representations of the allegory of Plato's cave than what I just gave you here. The Matrix is a great movie, by the way. It borrows a lot from that allegory. Neo, the protagonist, gets out of his world cave. Once he realizes he had been in a cave his whole life, he finds out who he is. Then he finds out what his purposes are. He had a purpose for Morpheus, one for Trinity, and the main purpose was saving humanity. So Plato doesn't present details regarding why one person was on chain and not the others. How was that person chosen? Was it at random? Was it that this person had a more curious mind? Maybe a more curious mind than the rest? And the most likely to have an open mind to accept the real world. Why was this person chosen? This fascinates me. I can talk for an hour about the person who was released and another hour about the others who were not. If a person who is outside of your culture, outside of your religion, outside of your race, your age group, your gender identity, outside of your political views or affiliations, if that person comes and invites you to explore, more importantly, invites you to understand what is outside of each of those caves, will you go? That's another question I leave for you to ask yourself today. By the way, I believe we are in multiple caves. I have noticed most people are willing to explore outside of their cultural cave, but outside of their religion or political caves, that has proven extremely difficult. A mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it is not open, Franz Zappa said. Now, I need to make this clear. Even though I call myself unchained thinker, my mind is not completely unchained, so I understand that. My thinking is not completely free. I don't think it will ever be. Just like in hermeneutics, my horizon expands ever more every time I move towards it. Once I arrive at an Ithaca, another Ithaca appears in my view. So why this podcast? I really have no hidden agenda. A question arises in my mind. I wonder if I can do X, and I just do it to find out. I am aware I'm just another cicada in the jungle trying to make my voice heard among the others. I have a curious mind, that's for sure. My passion in life is to learn. Those who know me can probably tell you I can talk for hours. So here I am putting all of those together in a podcast. Also, I believe we should reinvent ourselves at a minimum every 10 years to keep life interesting. So that's what I'm really doing here. Will I succeed? I don't know. Will I fail? Probably. But the fear of failure has never stopped me. Have I succeeded in life? Yes. Have I failed? Many times. Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. Those are the words of Winston Churchill. I know many of you have lots of questions. They will be answered, I promise. Now, I also know many have come before me, and many will come after me with similar ideas, similar style, maybe even similar podcasts. But in the words of Eminem, they may be the next best thing, but not quite me. My podcast will be a little bit of everything at first, but it may evolve into something different in the future. I don't know yet. I'm excited to find out, and we'll do this together. Let me finish this episode with this. Our eyes have become accustomed to the darkness of our own caves, our religious caves, our political caves, cultural, societal, etc. In order for us to see how truly dark a cave is, we are going to have to step outside and look back in. Let's unchain our thinking together. Let's get out of our caves. Let's find out who we are, and let's find our purposes. I'm excited, extremely excited about the journey ahead. Let's go.